It's the Fan3Cast, dishing out the hottest NASCAR news and views while celebrating the Three's historic comeback. Here are your hosts, Michael Metzger and Jason Schultz.
We are back for yet another edition. Jason, the fans have not gotten sick of us just yet.
They haven't, but we hope that they keep us around for a while more. And after last week, I have a bunch to talk about more, so definitely another great show ahead for whoever wants to listen.
I'm happy to report that there was no rain last week, so we don't get to talk about that. But what we can talk about is the Auto Club Speedway in Fontana, California, site of this weekend's Auto Club 400. They were able to announce that they had a sellout for the first time in many years.
And that was, we talk about taking away 24,000 seats, which really brings up the topic of, hey, is it better to take away seats and sell out, or sell out, or have a bunch of seats and not be able to sell out? And after this weekend, you just saw nothing but praise that the Auto Club Speedway sold out the race, and they had a bunch of fans in the stands. But if you looked at it on TV, grandstands did not see that completely full, so that's a little questionable there. But it just seems as if the track sells out after the takeaway seat, it's nothing really different than if they sold out with the same amount of seats they used to have.
Yeah, there's a couple things that are interesting with Auto Club Speedway and a bunch of other speedways. NASCAR stopped publicizing the attendance figures to races, I want to say maybe 3 years ago, when we kind of had a dip in attendance. So until a press release comes out from a track, saying that we have sold out like that, you don't really know what the attendance is. But it is interesting that they took away those seats. Do you think that kind of drove the demand up? Because I think after seeing this weekend's events, there will be a lot more demand because of the racing, but having less seats out there, I don't know if that was, made it so more people wanted to go or couldn't go.
I would definitely say that after the 2013 race with all of those storylines, that definitely made people think, well, I probably want to go to this race. It was pretty good last year. And after this year, they're definitely come back next year. So I'm not saying it's all due to the sellouts, all due to the incredible racing, but I think it's just, you don't really know how many people they had before they removed the seats. So it could be just maybe a few more thousand people showed up than the year before. But I think they probably didn't have an overwhelming amount charge the track after the previous races. It just seemed a little more full with less seats this year.
Yeah, the Auto Club Speedway is a track that definitely shows that less is more, especially when you think about how they had 2 dates for the longest time and struggled to sell them out. So you condense it down to one, you condense the seating, and then the racing gets better. Right there, it drives up the demand and is actually probably the formula for success for that track.
Definitely is, and races like you saw on Sunday and if we saw on Saturday, they're definitely bringing the fans in the stands. And speaking of the Saturday race, Kyle Larson grabbing his first career Nationwide Series race, his Nationwide Series win, second career NASCAR win, which he was able to hold off a really hard charging Kevin Harvick and Kyle Busch in the final laps, and those two really had probably one of the best battles we've seen in the Nationwide Series in a very long time.
What was interesting to me was trying to figure out if Harvick was trying to go for the win or if he was just trying to go for ruining Kyle Busch's day.
I hope he wasn't trying to ruin Kyle's day, but I would just look at it trying to go for the win a little more than that.
Now, with Kyle Larson's win, there wasn't quite as much backlash as he's now a Cup Series regular about him winning the race versus, say, a Kyle Busch. The interview prior to the race they had with Kyle Busch, he was getting pressed on the issue, asking if it's a bad thing for the Cup drivers to be there, and so on. His response was a little salty in that it basically boiled down to being a Kyle Busch problem, that people don't like Kyle Busch. I'm paraphrasing, that's not exactly what he said, but he pointed out there certainly aren't as many boos when Brad Keselowski or Joey Logano win. So where would you rank this in your opinion, Jason? Is Larson running for a Nationwide Series team not equal to Kyle Busch winning in a Joe Gibbs Racing Cup team, basically, and taking your Kyle Busch fandom aside?
Despite the logistics of the Nationwide Series and who they're running for, I think that, and they're Cup drivers nonetheless, and they are both great Cup drivers, so they should be treated equally as when they win. So I definitely think it's a Kyle Busch rule, or Kyle Busch rule fans they don't want to see Kyle Busch. No one, Kyle's never really gained the biggest following in the sport, and when he wins, it just seems to aggravate fans more and more. So fans are just angry to see him win all the time. But when you see guys like Larson or Keselowski or Logano win, there's not as much backlash because the fans don't hate them as much as they do Busch, and they just want to see anybody but Kyle Busch win usually.
Haters be hating, right?
Yeah.
Well, 65 times the victory lane to Kyle Busch's credit is a ton, and maybe it's time for someone else to get in there, in my opinion, but then again, I'm not a Kyle Busch fan.
Kyle's going to win a lot more races, and the fans really have to, get used to that. But I don't think he's going to slow down his Nationwide Series races anytime soon.
Yeah, as long as there's people that are willing to sponsor his car and they're willing to get him to race, you'll see Kyle Busch racing in the Nationwide Series. Now, one driver that you didn't see race this weekend, which was a surprise to many, it happened roughly 30 minutes prior to the drop of the green flag of Sunday's Auto Club 400, was Denny Hamlin. A lot of questions about what happened to Hamlin this weekend. What we do know is he had a severe sinus infection. He was having vision problems, which actually today was released. There was a little piece of metal actually in his eye, which was causing the vision problems for him. My question that I haven't really heard too much about an answer of, was it Hamlin's call to pull himself from the car, or is it NASCAR's call?
I think it was more of a Joe Gibbs Racing and NASCAR call. I don't think that if Denny can really keep his eyes open, he should really be in the race car in the first place. So I think it just was safer to keep him out of the ride, and just the whole storyline, probably the shock we've had this season for him to really have to step out 30 minutes before the race and everything to, the whole stuff to blow up the Raven in there just before the race is about to start. And you saw Sam Horner Jr. come to the rescue, and that reminds me of the July 2012 Daytona race when Sam Horner Jr. came to the rescue of H. Allmendinger after he was suspended for failing a drug test. So Mr. Hornish is always there to lend a hand to the drivers who are late race scratches, but to me it was just probably a huge shock and nothing we saw coming.
I know Dale Earnhardt Jr. kind of spoke about this the other day at the Charlotte Motor Speedway, that there needed to be more transparency as to what was going down with Hamlin. There's a lot of wild rumors that came up because of how quickly he exited and got whisked away, so to speak, and then Hornish was put right in there. That, I don't know. I know that they didn't quite have all the information, like what was in his eye and what the deal was, but do you think we would get to a point where NASCAR would be a little bit more forthcoming with the situation, or it's probably up to the discretion of the teams to release that information?
It's probably more of the teams to release information because it's really personal for them. It doesn't really have to do with overly with NASCAR. It's pretty much a team decision, and it really affects the teams more than NASCAR. So I think whatever the teams are willing to release, they're going to say, and there'll always be stuff that they're not going to say.
Now, the main storyline of the Auto Club 400 this weekend started with a T. It was the two T's: tires and tempers. Which one do you want to tackle first, Jason?
So I'd say on your tires, definitely pretty big, shock for the weekend with really teams having difficulty with the tires, and they were blowing and they couldn't really run that many laps on them, and it was just nothing everyone really saw coming. But to me, I didn't really expect it going to the race, but the older surfaces tend to have more tire issues like we saw at Atlanta last August, where they were having a little more tire issues, and tires are playing more of a role than they usually do. And I think that just goes along with the old racing surfaces that some tracks have right now.
Well, they had a couple different scenarios playing into it this weekend. Not only were drivers using the apron a little bit more than they had been, which adds stress to the tires, teams were monkeying around with the air pressures, which, if you read Brad Keselowski's response after the race, he kind of pushed it as being a Goodyear issue. Goodyear kind of pushed back on the teams and said that they were doing things that they didn't recommend. And then you have people like Kyle Larson, who after the race said, hey, we didn't blow a single tire. I don't know what these guys' problems was. Was it just bad combinations for some of the top teams, maybe trying to push the envelope a little bit more than others?
Yeah, they were definitely trying to push the envelope a lot in the race, and they always do that every weekend, but it just seems as they were being a little over-aggressive at Fontana. camera, which was probably the reason why you saw so many issues with the tires.
Well, it definitely made things interesting. It made to set up a real wild finish. Unfortunately, some of us, me, picked Jimmy Johnson to win the race, and that didn't quite come through. But before we get into that wild finish that was set up because of the tires, let's take a moment to talk about tempers. Now, we're going to the Martinsville Speedway next, where close quarter racing, and that's where you expect tempers to be had. But they were out in full force on Sunday.
Oh, yeah, and I didn't get to catch most of the race on Sunday, but I know you were in on the Parker Kligerman last 15 years ago. You at least saw.
Yeah, Parker Kligerman ended up wrecking. Unfortunately, it was his third DNF in 5 races. He is having an absolutely miserable start to his rookie campaign. It was interesting watching Twitter because someone tweeted that they heard the very end of him saying that, I hope that person gets sat out for the rest of the year. And everyone was like, what? Later in the day, Parker Kligerman tweeted that Casey Mears, in fact, had actually taken him out, that he'd been racing around him, and I guess Mears just, gave him a pop in the back. But since there's no video evidence of it, we can only take Kligerman at his word, and it was just, you didn't see that normally from Kligerman. He's usually such an even-keel guy that I think the frustration of the season's really getting to him.
Oh, definitely. When you are really, he's really not the greatest team. They're still really growing and developing, and they always have the best equipment. So when you guys have a sort of a good day, I'm not really sure how his day was going before this, but when he's having a decent run, probably, if something happened, he probably gets a little more angry than he would if they were having off the plate and something happened. And that was not where the temper ended on Sunday. You saw Brian Scott now, Eric Almirola getting into it a little with a wreck on the front stretch, and Scott got into the back of Almirola, and after the incident, Almirola called Scott the rich kid racing every once in a while in Cup Series because his daddy pays for it, which is, of course, it's pretty true, but at the same time, it's not probably why he has a rise. Brian Scott does have some talent, but yeah, the money does play a part in everything too.
Unfortunately, that's modern-day NASCAR. About half the drivers can get there via talent. About half the drivers get there because they have some sort of sponsor connection. I'm interested, Jason. So when I was watching the replay, it totally looked like Brian Scott's fault. It looked like he was trying to race his line. Almirola had to check up because of the car in front of him slowing up, and Scott just continued. I don't know if he wasn't aware by his spotter or not. There was a lot of people that jumped on me on Twitter saying that it wasn't Scott's fault, that Almirola checked up, and hey, you check up, you get run over type of situation. What did you see?
Well, I pretty much thought it was Scott's fault. He should have been a little more aware of what was going on in front of him, and he really moved up the track a lot of lanes compared to what I think they usually do. He went from all the way to the bottom to pretty much all the way to the top in a few seconds. So it's definitely a little big swoop of a move, and probably he could have been a little more cautious in that situation.
That incident, which is, it shouldn't be amazing at this point, but when you watch Almirola's car go cutting through the grass, the most damage comes from when his car goes through the grass. Like, it dug in the front and ripped it totally off. It's just amazing that he hits the wall and there's barely anything, but then he runs over grass and it tears the whole front of the car off.
Yeah, the grass seems to be a pretty big issue when the car's hit this year, and maybe I'm not really sure if the car had something to do with it was being really low and having just like when it hit the scratch, like grass grains. It's just crazy to see how drivers could just spit out on the track and they get into the grass and their whole nose gets torn apart, and that's just unfortunate for whatever drivers, save it from wrecking the wall, but then get grass and get the whole front end torn apart.
Now, one driver that did get part of his front end torn apart, and that was Jimmy Johnson, who was leading late in the race when he lost the left front tire. That was a very tense last 10 laps or so where teams were possibly going to blow tires. A bunch did blow tires. And then you had the caution for Clint Boyer blowing a tire and spinning out. My first point or question that I have for you, Jason, is it seems like NASCAR has gotten very lax on throwing the caution for not only debris, but cars spinning. There was Carl Edwards and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. who spun to the inside of the track, and there was no caution. They got it going and were laps down. Edwards was able to recover for a top 10 finish. Boyer, on the other hand, started at the top of the speedway, spun out across, and then the caution came out. Has NASCAR maybe changed its policy on throwing the yellow flag as quick, or is it just case-by-case scenario? If you're out of the way, there's no caution?
I definitely think it's case by case. If the driver spins into the grass, there's really no threat to other drivers on the track. If he really a slow spin like you saw Edwards and Stenhouse have, and they just slide into the grass and make him get going again. But in Boyer's case, he was spinning on the track for a few seconds, so NASCAR had the clear caution there to react, so no other cars would be involved. But I don't think they've really changed their caution policy. It just sometimes we see instances like the spins in the grass that don't always come up. So drivers, NASCAR's not always able to, that's not always able. We're not always able to see that kind of caution be called unless it happens every once in a while.
So putting your crew chief hat on, you're Jeff Gordon's crew chief, Alan Gustafson. Do you still make the call to come in and get 4 tires, or would you, in retrospect, gamble with 2 and see how that leads?
Well, I think the 2 tires played out sort of well on the first lap of the pretty-much checker, the Tony Stewart and Kurt Busch, stay up front. But I think 4 tires is just the way to go, and you hope the refuel got pick up some luck on the restart. And, Kyle Busch and Kyle Larson, they definitely had the luck, and they were able to really come off of turn 2 on the final lap and really give us a show. And then for a split second, going down the backstretch, I really thought Kyle Larson was about to get Kyle Busch, and I was just prepared for what a story that would be if Kyle Larson was able to win his first Cup race on the same weekend he won his first nationwide race. And for him to be a hometown driver there and be able to win like that would be pretty spectacular.
What does this win, again, emphasizing that you're a Kyle Busch fan, what does this win do for that team? Because they've been off to a pretty rocky start to the season. Now they're kind of locked in. Well, they are locked into the chase. Will this ease morale or ease the tension maybe over there?
I think it will. Once the season gets rolling and we go like 5 to 10, 15 races into the year, and teams are going to have to start thinking about wins, and if they already have a win, then pressure's off. They don't really have to push the issue every week. They can just be a little more relaxed and go for a little more. So I think Kyle's he's definitely a little more relaxed, a little more going for the win over the next few weeks.
Now this Sunday had another shocker here. We had some further compliments with the leaderboard that Fox is using now, but then we also have something that might detract from it. Jason, if you could take us through the leaderboard and how the changes have happened for the better, and then at the same time what happens to kind of negate that.
Well, I really enjoyed when the caution comes out or the yellow flag was displayed. I noticed that the leaderboard Fox has lights up in that caution or white flags, the color of the flag, and you can definitely tell. It's really easy to tell if a car is out or it's the last lap and you have to really pay your attention. You can really jumps out at you. I really like that, but that to negate it, it's the sprint 20 to go. When that display, those graphics come up, it's basically a whole yellow border to your TV screen, and that makes it look so much like a caution. So that's one thing I would hope Fox would try to adjust, because I'd rather not get hopes up that we're going to have another restart when it's just a banner going across the screen that happens to be yellow.
Yeah, I think TNT did the same thing last year. They kind of had the banner that lit up, and it was the same thing, except for their sprint banner was every so often, so it wasn't even set like the 20 to go like Fox has going. But I don't know, we're slowly getting to a leaderboard that's acceptable, I think. I think we'll continue to find things that are wrong with it.
By the end of the season, end of the Fox portion of the season, we should have a decent leaderboard. And a little fun we're going to have here with the broadcast is we're going to take our all-star broadcast team, and there's not a lot of talk about, broadcasting nightly with NBC coming on next year. So we're going to give the 3 guys we'd like to see in the booth, and we most enjoy having in the booth. And my 3 guys are Mike Joy, Dale Jarrett, and Larry Mack. I really like Mike Joy's voice and how he's able to narrate the race, which really gets me excited every time the race comes on. I get to hear how he's going to call it. And Dale Jarrett, he's just like calm voice, and he knows what the drivers are going through, and he knows what they might do or what they can do. So I really like having his insight. Larry Mack, he's just really smart, and I really like his how he goes about calling different things and talking
The all-star team I would go with, and we actually share one of the participants, is I've always been a big fan of Alan Bestwick. I appreciate what Mike Joy brings to the table, but Bestwick always seems to be on top of what's going on. He adds humor when needed. It just sounds like a guy who's having fun out there. I'm going to have as the driver analyst Jeff Burton, because I think he's very well spoken. He's extremely knowledgeable on the sport. He'll tell it like it is. And then the third one, I'm going to go with Larry Mack as well. We're going to overlook his butchering of the English language at times, but like you said, Jason, he's extremely knowledgeable on the sport. He can explain things that allow you to make sense, and I think he's been so far the best crew chief that's transitioned into the broadcast booth. We'll have to see what Steve Letarte brings to the table, but I would pick Larry Mack any day.
Our power rankings are back again this week, and we share a few of the drivers, but at the same time, we both have different drivers leading off our power rankings. I have Carl Edwards on top, followed by Jimmy Johnson and Brad Keselowski. I picked Carl on top because he had a pretty good, decent weekend at Fontana. He also had he won at Bristol, so he's just on a little bit of a momentum ride right now, and I think that's why he's going to probably become one of the drivers that's probably pretty much staying at the top of the standings for most of the next few months. And I had Jimmy Johnson and Brad Keselowski because they are both still at the top of the standings. They didn't have the greatest races last weekend, but they have been staying this year.
As Jason said, I differ from him just a little bit. I lead off with Jimmy Johnson. Statistically, which everything that my power rankings is based around, says that Johnson is right up there. He would have won Auto Club had his tire held up. Woulda, shoulda, coulda. But he absolutely dominated that race and had it in the bag, so that helped his case. I have Jeff Gordon second, which you can make the same argument that as soon as Johnson had his tire failure, Gordon was going to win the race, except for that last caution. So Gordon really added to his statistical total. Plus, he's also one of two drivers to have 4 top 10 finishes in the 5 races, the other being Carl Edwards. Third, I have Brad Keselowski, which, again, he was another driver who was up there until having tire problems at the end. Because of being up there, that helped his statistical advantage. And it also doesn't hurt being right in the thick of things for the points battle. I definitely agree with Jason. Carl Edwards is creeping up there. It's just a matter of if he can put the statistics behind where he's running on the track.
The one driver we shared, Jimmy Johnson, he's going to be strong again this weekend when they head to Martinsville Racing, forced to be a short track racing, and we've missed a week off of short track racing. We've really missed the type of action we get to see when those tracks show up on the schedule, but that's always the type of racing that everyone loves to watch, and it's always fender, bumping, banging. It's just, like we said when we talked about before the Bristol race, it's just classic racing, and it's a racing everyone always is excited to watch because the excitement is never lacking.
Especially when you have a track like Martinsville, shaped like a paperclip, so you gun it down those straightaways, you slam on the brakes into the corner to try to make those extremely sharp corners. Drivers are going to use up brakes, they're going to use up their cars, and they're probably going to use up their patience in the process.
And with the new point system that would happen this season, we usually see tight racing at the end of the races at Martinsville, and we've seen years before with Jimmy Johnson and Jeff Gordon side by side for the last few laps, and who's going to pull out for the win. But would you think that with the new point system, could we see a driver racing closely with another driver on the last lap? Do you think he dumps him to get that one win he needs, or do they continue racing clean despite the more important of the wins this season?
I think you're definitely going to see some contact. When we're going over this and when you were talking just then, I was trying to visualize in my head the last time I've really seen someone get punted out of the way for a win at Martinsville. I couldn't recall anything off the top of my head. What was playing through there was, at least at Bristol, you have banking, so you can get into someone and they can go up the hill, so to speak, to get out of your way. Martinsville being such a tight corner, it's almost like Sears Point, where that last corner, you'd have to turn someone and then continue on yourself. So I could see the last maybe 5 to 10 laps or so, door to door banging like you were talking about between Gordon and Johnson, but I'm kind of doubting that we're going to have someone get turned in the last corner, kind of like what you'd see at a Bristol race.
If that was to happen, I would definitely think the driver trying to get another guy out of the way will have to really push up out of the groove or into the wall if they have hopes of winning. And Trevor, I have hopes of winning this weekend for the race picks or pick 'em. I'm going with Jeff Gordon for the win. He's been relatively consistent over the last few weeks, and he won the last college race in a pretty commanding fashion. He had a really strong end to that race, so I expect Gordon to be back in victory at Martinsville, and it's a great track for him, so I think he's got everything rolling for a victory this weekend.
Gordon has 8 career wins at the Martinsville Speedway. Jason, I'm going to quiz you a little bit. There's one other active driver that has as many wins as Gordon. Can you name him or her?
Is it 6 times?
It is 6 time. And guess who my pick is? I'm going with 6 time. The numbers don't lie. And Jimmy Johnson was a solid pick last weekend. Tires didn't factor into my equation. But at Martinsville, 8 wins, as I just mentioned. His average finish is a staggering 5.333. So on average, he finishes 5th place at this track. The other stat that jumped out at me was he has 24 career starts at the Martinsville Speedway. It's 21 times he's finished in the top 10. That's crazy.
We definitely agree on it being a Hendricks weekend this weekend at Martinsville. They are always strong there, and it seems like we expect them to have another stellar weekend in Virginia.
That is absolutely correct, because also statistically speaking, I love to throw that out there, Dale Earnhardt Jr., this is one of his best tracks. He just has never won there. Could this be the weekend that Jr. breaks that streak?
It definitely could be, and everyone will tune into Fox on Sunday because Martinsville is going to have some pretty fantastic racing.
And I'm going to throw a plug out there for Saturday's Camping World Truck Series race, where we're going to see, I believe, at least 6 drivers make their debut in the series, and then another handful that have only had under 5 races. So it's going to be crazy with all those rookies and inexperienced drivers out there to see how they negotiate the tricky paperclip-shaped track in Martinsville.
There will be a lot going on, so you'll want to catch us again next week when we dissect everything that will happen in the weekend at Martinsville.
Thanks for listening to the Fan3Cast. For more NASCAR coverage, check out StartingParkBlog.com and Turn4RacingNews.com. Follow along on Twitter at Fan3Cast, at StartingParkBlog, and at NASCARJason.